Welcome to Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. Coming up on the programme this week.
He's a dad. Of course he's never going to be cool. Despite all those things, you can still be heroic. And that is a sort of what a real hero looks like. It's someone that doesn't necessarily get it right, but keeps trying.
I've never quite got to the very crux of really why I felt the way that I did. I always got a sense that my worldview was of one point of view, but then my understanding of what the world would be like was something else. And then I think what happened was that neither of those stood me in good stead at all for what the reality of everything was that came beyond that point.
There were moments when he'd come over to me and be like, that was quite difficult to watch because obviously those parallels are there. And if nothing else, it reminds him of the conversations we've had and the life he's had with his sons.
And I'll be reminding you how you can make connections with mental health organisations within your community. It's Mental Health Monday.
We're the home of the UK's conversation about mental health. It's Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. We've had some really brilliant responses to the last few weeks' worth of podcasts. So thank you to everybody who's listening in, maybe tuning in for the first time, maybe checking out a new podcast for 2022, Mental Health Monday, with you every Monday. And we've had some really warm words as well in regard to our 5th birthday or 5th anniversary, 5 years of Mental Health Monday, more than 230 episodes, 24-hour shows and everything that's come with that as well. So many people have been in touch as well. Thank you to everybody for saying really nice things. Michael says, fantastic achievement, Mick. Keep flying the flag and keep us talking, with 2 hand-clapping emojis. I like that one, Michael. Thank you for that one. Also through Christian, who was one of our first guests on the programme. Thanks for having me on in the very early days, and thank you for carrying on this phenomenal work. Christian, thank you so much. Jonathan says, great work. Amazing job, Mick. Cheers, mate. Really appreciate that. What else have we got coming through as well? Can't believe it's 5 years already, says Louisa. Tell me about it. That's some achievement. Fantastic work, mate, says Alex. Amazing show. You have all done so much to help bring mental health to the conversation. Absolutely. Everybody who's been involved in the conversation, including Luciana Berger, who was our first ever guest on Mental Health Monday, who described the 5-year anniversary as an amazing achievement and commitment as well. Dr. Susie Gage, who's been on the programme too, says such a great show, and she's written that in capital letters, so it must be right. Fantastic work, Dr. Suze. Thank you so much for that one as well. I wanted to mention this one as well. Lizzie, who was the original producer on the programme. We had John Fogarty after that. Happy 5 years, Mick. Can't believe it's been so long. Remember that first episode like it was yesterday. You always wanted a legacy and you've created one. At 3 to 4 a.m. in the marathon, I couldn't see past minutes, never mind 5 years. Reminding us all of the fact that we did a 24-hour show. And after about 8 or 9 hours, we thought we've kind of proved the point here now, but we'd made the commitment to do it for 24 hours. It was so difficult, those sort of early morning hours through the night, to really find our way through. We had guests up until about 4 a.m., 5 a.m. maybe, and there was just like a lull period between, say, 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. where it was really, really difficult. Dave, who was involved in the production on the day, messaged to say, incredible, Mick. He said, he will never, ever forget that day for all of us. It sticks in my mind around the 5 a.m. time. The 5 of us talking, just words. Apart from you getting us to a break, I couldn't tell you what any of us were saying. I wonder if the full 24 hours is still available to listen to somewhere. Maybe I'll try and track that down. But thank you for all your kind words about the programme. Really appreciate it. Okay, so this week's episode is going out on what is being described as the most depressing day of the year. And I don't necessarily subscribe to it because I think it's born out of some marketing speak from a few years ago where they said, you know what, the second or third week in January where you're miles from payday, you're dealing with all your hassles from Christmas and weather's rubbish and so on and so forth, is the most depressing day of the year. It doesn't necessarily make any sense whatsoever. You can kind of see the logic that they're going for, but I think we all know depression doesn't really work like that. But an opportunity nonetheless to introduce you to a superhero on this week's programme, because there's a new film out created by and starring Ewan Pollitt, and Ewan is our guest on the programme. And he's got a new film starring Timothy Bentinck, who you may well know from a very famous radio drama, directed as well by Angus Imrie, who, if you've ever seen The Kid Who Would Be King, plays the role of Merlin. He's brilliant as well. He also features in the very same radio drama. And the film introduces a superhero, but it's a superhero with a difference. And it's based on the fact that actually we can all kind of be superheroes when it comes to making a difference to people's lives. In this particular case, it focuses on Ewan's character and conversations that he's able to have with his dad while out and about walking through the Lake District, while he's out rambling through the hills, and how those conversations, although they might be awkward to start with, can actually make a real connection and set people on a really positive path. That connection between family members or trusted friends, colleagues, loved ones, whoever it might be, that can really make a difference. So our superhero that we're going to discuss this week is Rambler Man. And actually, Rambler Man is the name of the film. And of course, he doesn't wear a cape. He just looks like a dad who's gone for a walk up a hill. But it's a really interesting insight into having that mental health conversation. And as we'll hear, it's born out of Ewan's lived experience as well. Now, there's going to be loads of opportunities to catch this throughout the course of the year. He's originally based in Cumbria, now based in London, so there'll be opportunities, I hope, right across the country. If you want to find out more information about the film, ramblermanfilm.com. I'll mention that in the podcast as well as at the end, where I'll signpost to some services. ramblermanfilm.com for more. Ewan Pollitt is our guest on this week's Mental Health Monday. We started by talking about how the film came about.
Well, it really is. It's a product of that first lockdown in 2020. I'm from the Lake District originally, and so obviously it draws a lot from my life. But I don't think it's a coincidence that I wrote something about home and where I'm from in that 1 year I couldn't go back. I definitely think there's a connection there in terms of missing it or feeling, that attachment more strongly because I couldn't go back. But yeah, it honestly, it comes from my experiences of spending my whole youth climbing up mountains with my dad and being around those and kind of knowing that part of the world and being out and being physical and exploring in that way was definitely, obviously, it was a part of, my personality and kind of my own mind and who I am. So not having that, I think really prompted me to write something and experience it in a different way.
I think if anyone's got a rambling dad, and I certainly do, I have very fond memories of, because we're just an hour from the Lake District where I'm based, so we could get up and have those Saturday afternoon walks, and they were very much like a family occasion. It'd be one of his friends, other kids from other families would be there, and it'd be like almost like a social occasion. But I always sort of presume when he went and did it, I always presumed that it was like almost like a challenge, an up and down a mountain, a mountaineering thing. Whereas as I've got older, I think I've realized that there is sort of great beauty in those spaces. But I think just to be in those spaces, to breathe the fresh air, can be really, really beneficial. And I think you dismiss something your parents do as, oh, that's just something my dad does. And as soon as you find the reason that they're doing it, you start thinking, oh, what a great point he had.
Exactly. I mean, there was the whole thing in my childhood of, I used to get dragged orienteering. I don't know if you've been orienteering, but it's not exactly the coolest of sports for a teenager. And so I rebelled and refused to ever orienteer again. But the older I get, the more I realize that's fantastic. You get out and about, it's great exercise, it's a social event. And maybe this is just a universal thing of becoming more like your parents as you get older. But you start to realize all the other reasons why one would get out and about and be outdoors. And like you say, it's just to be there in itself is an act of doing yourself a favor. It really does help you in a lot of ways, no matter where you are.
Just tell me then about sort of your own mental health journey. So you obviously had the walks in the Lake District, growing up there. But obviously, as you get older, as people move into their late teens, their 20s, life goes in different directions and things can change. How did things change for you?
Yeah, so my mental health journey is kind of really, I first noticed it when I was finishing up university, so in my very early 20s. And basically since then, I've had bouts of depression. They'll come and go, different severity. There was one time I was traveling around Australia after university, and I had essentially a breakdown when I was in Sydney. And just very, very, lots of different complex things going on. It's very hard to pinpoint a thing that caused it. But there, I came back, and since then, it's just been something I've dealt with. I've had some great support networks in place. I'm lucky in that I have, a lot of people there for me, and it's not something that's just me. Both my older brothers have had their own experiences, and so in a strange sort of way, we've gotten quite used and good at helping each other. And always being there around. So I'm lucky to have those support networks. But since going through this over the last 7 years, you start to learn and kind of realize, and you're aware of the things that trigger you, or you can realize when you're going in and out of things. And honestly, the biggest thing for me was connections to outdoor spaces. I've tried lots of different things, talking therapies and medications, and I think they all have their place, but each person's going to have their own set of things that help them. And for me, it's the outdoors, it's the physical activity, it's the connections I get when I am outdoors with my father and my brothers and things. And so that's just, I don't know what I would do without those things.
So tell us, where's the connection then between having that experience and then actually being able to turn it into a film that people can actually go and see? So was that about the training that you had and the interest that you had in general life?
Yeah, I think, I trained as an actor, and I'm moving slowly into the writing and producing kind of side of things. And I've kind of always had this in my mind of telling a story about, people often say like, well, write what you know. And I was like, well, I know the lakes, I know the mountains and stuff. I'd really want to tell a story there. And and similar with my, own mental health journey, I thought there's something there, there's something to be done. And so, yeah, during lockdown, when I couldn't go back, we spent a lot of time reminiscing about, what if we were there, we could go up that mountain and do this and do that, and talking about that. And just I sort of had the idea of, I'd like to tell a story of how that kind of superhero-esque thing, as a child could see their father as a superhero very, very easily, and how that would translate into a more like everyday adult act of heroism. And so the idea of, and it was something we used to joke about as a family, the idea of the world's most like average superhero, like Rambler Man kind of thing. He just eventually gets things sorted. And so that kind of just turned into it. And it's obviously, the name started as a joke, but then it very quickly, as I was writing it, I was thinking, yeah, there is a sort of very, very sincere act of heroism in like going on walks, and a persistent and patient sort of love and support. And so that's how the film sort of came to be. I wrote the first draft in about 72 hours. Obviously, I spent about a month making it good. But the kind of initial concept and idea, it was one of those, I've got nothing else to do in lockdown, and kind of came onto the page.
Now, when you are scripting something like that, of course, you were aware that you were looking to film on mountainsides, where so much of it would be about not what was being said, but what was being seen, and those unspoken things as well. So were you having to picture the styles that you would be stepping over and the views that you would be looking at when you were framing each of the conversations around the particular environments that you were framing them?
Yeah, no, I mean, when I first thought of it, I honestly wanted to be able to people to watch this and understand it if it was no dialogue. When I was first writing it, I thought, and I can't remember, many people have said that you should be able to turn off the sound of a film and still be interested in it if it's any good. And so I thought, well, I want to be able to show this story and go for the dialogue. And there's odd bits of dialogue in there, but the real driving force is the story that is shown on screen in the film. And so, yeah, when I came to mind, when I wrote it and was thinking of these different scenes, it was a visual thing as much as it was, what's the story and all of that. And yeah, certain mountains came to mind, and certain styles and certain things I've experienced. And we went to those places in the film. So it was definitely a visual thing when making it.
How do you approach in the film those moments where a conversation begins? You've got Rambler Man, the superhero who's there to, not save the day, but to a certain extent save the day. How do you begin to write that so it represents a true reflection about how somebody in a more vulnerable position might open up to somebody who has got more superhero qualities about them?
I think, when I was writing it, there was a certain sense of, it's very difficult to sit someone in a room and go, right, we're going to talk about this. That is very hard to do. People are very reluctant to do it, and it often doesn't really work because it's a pressurized situation. And so the whole act of going on these walks in the film, the whole act of being there like that, is to take the pressure off, is to do something else. It's to catalyze a sort of slow coming together. And so that had to be reflected in the dialogue. They're not going to just walk, right, we've done a mile, let's talk about this. It's going to be a slow process. It might not have happened on that walk, it could be the next 3 walks kind of thing. And so there was a certain sense of it had to be a sort of natural natural opportunity for the conversation to arise. It sort of had to be an organic coming together. It happened to happen on that particular walk, and that's the walk that the film shows. So there's a patience in the dialogue, I suppose. You've got to have that.
There was we had a guest on the program at the back end of last year who'd written a short film about their mental health experience. They actually had the full conversation, the transcriptions of their therapy sessions that they could directly take phrases from, or which I thought was obviously a great resource because it's very real, and they were representing that moment as well. You mentioned the short writing time that you spent on it in the first draft. Was that easy to put onto page, that first maybe expression of despair, depression, those first moments? Did that come easy to write down, or did you look at it, read it once and think, no, I've not got it there? Or was there a moment where you thought, oh, that's the thing, that's the moment, that's the in that makes this conversation real?
I think it was a sort of an in and out kind of thing, in that when I first made the whole script as a thing, there was so little said, and then you think, right, well, am I doing this justice? And so I added more dialogue, and there was kind of more frank lines and things like that. And then you kind of think maybe that wouldn't be said, and you start to think more about the visual medium. So it sort of went in, and it was quite hard to put a lot of this stuff in, kind of dealing with that father-son dynamic and the semi-autobiographical nature of it, and writing things, because these aren't easy conversations. And then as you're writing it, and it's quite difficult, and testament to the person who put those transcriptions of therapy, because those aren't easy conversations to write that. And then you kind of go, well, people naturally keep these conversations to a minimum, I think, because they're hard. You just want to get across, and a lot of this is so much what isn't said. It's body language, everything, which through film you can show. So a lot of that then turned into directions rather than actual dialogue. Instead of just saying, it's seen on screen and each character knows what's happening. So it sort of kind of went in to show the story, and then kind of got reduced down to its kind of most human kind of actual form. Yeah.
Did you feel any pressure around creating, in particular in this case, the father figure played by Timothy Benting, that you create the Rambler Man, as in this is the hero of the piece, that you've it's not about making them infallible, but by almost putting them in that sort of superhero position, you've got to, I guess, create a character that audiences relate to. But I think also the audiences will want to be inspired by. What was it about him? What did he say? How did he open up that conversation? How could he be that person without saying absolutely the wrong thing, making a complete hash of it, making a fool of himself, and then the son turns away and goes, "Oh, I wish I'd never brought this up now."
Well, I think that's the truth of it. There is no perfect those superheroes like that are fictitious. They're not. There is no Superman that gets everything right every time, and that's kind of part of the point in this kind of persistent, ongoing. I think it's personally more heroic to be there for someone over 3 years, getting it wrong and wrong and wrong, and then right and wrong and wrong and right and wrong and wrong and right, then just turn up one day, Bob's your uncle, everything's done. I think that's far more heroic, to be there constantly and being willing to risk those awkward conversations and making things worse or saying the wrong thing. And I think in the film it's quite apparent that he is no expert, but he does the thing that he does know, which is walking and talking, and that's where he excels, and that's where he manages to save the day, so to speak. So I think it was about making him fallible and a bit awkward, and a dad. He's a dad. Of course, he's never going to be cool, in that sort of way. And so that was kind of a big part of it, and showing that despite all those things, you can still be heroic in that way. And that is a sort of what a real hero looks like. It's someone that doesn't necessarily get it right, but keeps trying, and eventually, saves the day.
Has your dad seen the film, or does he recognize the representation?
Oh, absolutely. He found it. He's flipped between feeling awkward about it, finding it hilarious, and being incredibly proud any given day. And he was involved in the film. He helped us make it. He was our mountain guide, along with well, my father, Chris, and another person called Chris were our two kind of mountain guides, which was very confusing. But so they were there on the day, sort of doing all the while we were worrying about everything else. They do the navigation and make sure everyone was all right on the mountain. And so they were there. So he was there, especially in some of the emotional scenes. And there were moments when he'd come over to me and be like, that was quite difficult to watch, because obviously those parallels are there. And if nothing else, it reminds him of the conversations we've had and the life he's had with his sons. So I think he's very aware of it all, but one might have to distance themselves a bit, because it's not a film about him specifically. It's just very much inspired by. And so I imagine maybe, it is a bit strange sometimes to see this happen.
As you mentioned that sort of period of time where you experienced, your difficult times, that
Mm-hmm.
sort of period of the 20s, I completely understand that as well, in terms of where I was at, in terms of that ending of university. And part of me thinks that and I've never quite got to the very crux of really why I felt the way that I did. I always got a sense that, looking back now, it was that my worldview was of one point of view, but then my understanding of what the world would be like was something else. And then I think what happened was that neither of those stood me in good stead at all for what the reality of everything was that came beyond that point. One of the things I always think now, one of the mistakes I made, is that I should have just gone home. Like, I should have gone back to my mum and dad and gone, like, whatever it is I'm trying to do. There's a great song lyric, which is, I'll get it right, but I don't know when. Like I feel like I could do this job, or I feel I can, navigate the world in front, but I'm getting it wrong, and I'm making mistakes, and I can't see when those mistakes are coming. But when I make those mistakes, it makes me feel absolutely dreadful. All of those skill sets that I learned don't really play out like they did at school in the real world, because people aren't just interested in it, being top of the class or whatever. It doesn't mean anything once you're 21 and applying for it just doesn't anymore. And I always kind of got the sense that I couldn't turn back to my parents, because I was supposed to be beyond that, because I was supposed to be an adult at that point. Of course, I realize now there's a great deal of empathy within your parents. And I think now, as a parent, I can be empathetic as well. And you don't have to necessarily view that relationship between a father and son, mother, daughter, whoever, as being one of sort of like higher and lower, the one who knows everything and the one who knows nothing. There is a point where that gap joins up, I think, quite quickly, and sometimes goes the other way. And I think that's an understanding, I think, of how we see ourselves within society, within our own family backgrounds. Do you understand the points I'm making?
I think, yeah. And I think that partly, yeah, in the film, I think there's a certain amount of you spend your childhood going, well, I won't have these problems when I'm grown up, because I'll be grown up. And then you grow up and you realize that there's no magical thing that happens when you turn 18. You still have all those problems. There's a sort of fiction that grown-ups can deal with everything, when really we're just people. And I think there is that sense of when you go home and you speak to your parents, and maybe you start moving from that sense of, yeah, I know everything, you don't, because you're a child. You move into, welcome to adulthood, you're now a peer, and I can't help you because we all are completely flawed, but we can empathize now. And you move from being, okay, what's the answer, to wisdom, experience, and empathy from a parent. And that can be probably quite strange for a parent as well, because they're very used to, oh, here's the answer, to then going, oh, well, we don't know that either. But sorry about that.
Obviously, we're talking about sort of that child and parent relationship. Do you think, or have you explored that idea around it being somebody else, that it doesn't have to necessarily be a parent, that it might be a friend, it may be, maybe a relative, it may be someone that it may be a teacher, or someone, that's been a prominent, it doesn't necessarily maybe have to be that distinct blood relative?
Oh, no, absolutely. I think it could be, it's anyone, I think, that can be there. It could be, anyone. It could be a work colleague. It could be, you're right, not a blood relative. It could be someone very experienced, a mentor in a certain career. I think and with the film, obviously, it shows this father-son dynamic, and there's, very specific things about that sort of dynamic. But the sort of deeper meaning is that being there in a way that is not exactly very glamorous. It's quite familial or very friendship based. Seeing someone at their worst, not at their dramatic moments. It's the sort of mundane, everyday, yeah, I'm going to be here for you during these parts. And then obviously you do get the life affirming moments on top of the mountain and all of this stuff. But that doesn't have to be a family. It can be any sort of loved one or friend or work colleague. A work colleague seeing you every single day can be there far more than a family who lives on the other side of the country. So absolutely, I think there's a sort of universal truth in that can happen in any sort of relationship or between two different people.
Can I ask you about move back to the film and sort of the choices you made around sort of filming and the challenges you'd have faced as well? That
yes.
if this is the Hollywood movie, it's difficult and it's really hard. And there's a moment where the son can't make it, but the father reaches and grabs him because the father was always there, and they get to the top, and then the son's there and the son's out, and then credits roll, and we'll be okay, son, you and I together. But I guess in reality, filming it in the Lake District it was probably too misty to film certain scenes. You get to the top and the whole place was covered in mist. And then, of course, there's so much around that rambling culture, which is about the journey back down the other side, and then the trip to the pub afterwards, and the trip to find somewhere warm, and the parking ticket you've got to deal with as well. Have you made it a much more British experience of rambling than that Hallmark version of it that I described before?
I think so. I think there's certain definitely very grounded in reality moments. And yeah, I think you say if it was Hollywood, we would have been up there for a month and wait until the weather was perfect. Oh, it's raining today, we'll wait till tomorrow. There would have been everything. But that very much wasn't the case. This is a very much a passion project, shoestring budget indie thing. And so it was all filmed in 2 days, weekend, getting up on the Friday, filming no, it was during the week, but it was 2 days. We treated it as a weekend. But and so yeah, it was very quick. It was very deal with what you've got. There's in the script the weather is glorious sunshine, but if you when people see the film, that's very much not the case. But that, we all agree, has made it so much better. Would have been glorious sunshine. Now that it wasn't that, it's added something to it. It became so much more because of that. And you're right, it's not Hallmark. There are moments in it, it's very much people going on a ramble. And I was very conscious throughout making this in terms of both writing it and producing it. And Angus, the director, was very aware of this as well. There were certain things we had to do in order to not be crucified by the rambling community. In terms of where we film, it has to be consistent where we film. There's a big thing of I can't start the film in one place and then be on a mountain 80 miles away just because it looks better. I'd never be forgiven by my father and anyone who saw the film who's been to the Lake District. So I had to have that sort of grounded in reality consistency. And I think if we changed all of that, if we'd tried to make it Hollywood or perfect, it wouldn't have been true to the message of the film, which is this sort of really realistic everyday heroism. And that's going to involve some boring parts of life. But I mean, in the film, we see this wonderful walk, but they get ready for the walk and they're there for it and they do the walk and stuff. And normally, yeah, you'd skip right to the top of the mountain, but that's not the whole journey, because it is a journey. The film is what makes it so meaningful. And so there's a very, I think, touching realism about the film.
We talk about the Lake District as a place. There's quite a lot of talk at the moment around like tourists ruining it, paths getting too wide on mountains. That it's a tourist attraction, which I can understand those arguments. But at the same time, I'm thinking that's great if fewer people go, fine, because that means I can go and there are less people and it's easier to find a parking space. And so, but at the same time, if everybody had a weekend every couple of months in a place like that, I think their outlook on life would be like, I don't know. I have this thing where I drive away from Lake Windermere as you go up and you can't see the lake anymore. But like at that moment, there's a little moment of sadness that I'm leaving it behind, in the same way that when I'm coming in the morning and I see the lake for the first time, my heart does something with and I don't necessarily know what it is. It's not leaping like I'm seeing, my first girlfriend or something like that, and I'm 15 years of age, but it's doing something where it's taking me to a place. And I'm seeing green, and I'm seeing water, and I'm sometimes seeing rain, and I'm seeing other like-minded people, and I'm heading up on a mountain, but it's really actually quite difficult, and the terrain's terrible, and I've got a bit of a leak in my boot. So I shouldn't necessarily be feeling fantastic. But at the same time, I'm thinking there's nowhere else I'd rather be.
I think there's a certain amount of you're in awe of these things, and there's no worry about this. There's no way to get the Lake Districts wrong. You can just go and you enjoy it, and you're part of something much bigger than yourself, and there's no pressure. It's just I could sit here all day and enjoy it. I could walk up this, I could do that. And I think there's a certain, there's also almost like a cathedral-like quality when you're at the bottom of a valley and you're looking up around this stuff. And it's food for the soul. And for me personally, to go back and just be part of something really grand and wonderful there. And yeah, I think absolutely everyone does have the right. It's a national park. Everyone has the right to enjoy it. There's debates to be had over how to responsibly enjoy it and how to make everyone enjoying it more sustainable. There's too many cars in the Lake District. Okay, well, how do we improve the infrastructure so people don't need cars there? Bus times, train time, all that stuff. And then in terms of numbers and things like that, but you can't. I think it'd be a very wrong idea to say, it's definitely not certain people that can come here and certain people can't, or this time of year and stuff. Everyone has the right to enjoy these outdoor spaces, and it doesn't have to be the Lake District. I think it's a beautiful place that everyone wants to go to. But there are also wonderful places all over the country that, people can go to. I think there is something everyone should explore in terms of their mental health in going to a place like this. And I think the Lakes has that wonderful quality of it looks amazing, but it's very accessible, relatively speaking. Obviously there's things to be done about access needs for people with different access needs in the Lake District. But, going to the Alps and going up into the Alps is very different to going to Windermere for the day. And you can go up and down and be within a pub within an hour from basically anywhere in the Lake District. And so I think it balances between those two things of it being wild enough to really get the most out of it, but then also you can get there in a day and enjoy yourself and come back. And that's the gift it gives to everyone, is that everyone can go to the lakes and enjoy yourself there. And I think people who see the film will go, oh, we could do that. People won't be intimidated by this. There are some fantastic films where you see people, they climb K2 and you're like, yes, that would probably really help you out, but I can't do that on my weekend.
To be honest, whenever those films start, and they're always called the towering abyss, or I always think, is someone going to die? I don't think I can enjoy this. If I know someone at some point is going to fall off this cliff, I'm not really going to enjoy it. Can I ask you, this isn't about a sequel as such, but like when people say, oh, we could do that, are the themes within it almost transferable, that it could be, mother and daughter, going to a football match, or, do you think there's something in that people will actually go, well, okay, fine, well, I'm not necessarily going to go and climb a mountain, but the things that are within this about mental health and about taking your mind to somewhere else and having that conversation might actually be, something that's, seaside related, or something within an urban environment?
Absolutely. I think there is a real thing to be taken there of one journey and one experience something with someone else. I think that is a thing that anyone can take. You could go for a drive with someone, you could walk around the park with someone, and it's more showing how there are other ways to connect with someone, and you can take the pressure off. You can go do something with someone, and you may not even have to say anything, but that act in itself is something. There was one of the producers, Kat White, who was on the podcast previously with her film 54 Days.
Sure.
She explores swimming, and that as a physical activity with and that and doing something with in her film with someone eventually. So there is something to be taken there that doesn't really involve mountains, doesn't have to be father and son, it doesn't have to be in an extravagant place, but you can take being there for someone and going doing something with someone in any situation, any country, any place. I do think, yeah.
I always think, I think as well in terms of that, and I think of the people that I grew up with, that they might see something like this and actually think there's somebody I'm meaning to have a conversation with, or maybe there's somebody who I think may have, maybe something to say. Let's go and do something. Let's go and plan a walk. where we can get out into that environment. And those conversations, for anyone who's done any walking will know, those conversations just sort of ebb and flow and come and go. And I think that's one of those things where if we can get into that mindset whereby this isn't just about, can we get to the top, take a photo and put it on Instagram? This is about that journey. And actually, while we're doing this, we can have a really great conversation about the grief issue that they're dealing with, or, you know, the reason they've not been showing up on, you know, WhatsApp messages, those sorts of things as well, that people can be inspired to think, I can create a safe environment that I can have a conversation that's not going to become, you know, this clinical emergency, but actually is sort of an empathetic environment where a conversation can take place that is progressive and proactive, but doesn't have to be a be all and end all conversation about capital M, capital H mental health.
Oh, absolutely. I think like you say, it's about a safe, productive place, but there is no be all end all. It has to happen. And I think that's because if one goes for a walk up a mountain, one is going for a walk up a mountain, and you may make an incredibly conducive environment to have a chat. But if you don't have a chat, that wasn't actually what you set out to do. You set out to do something. And so even if you don't talk, you still get that sense of achievement. You get the physical activity and great endorphins. And, you know, you spend time with someone else, all things that will help our mental health. And then also you might have a chat, which will also help our mental health. But like you say, the pressure is off there. It can be a very safe, emotional environment to test the water, to explore, and it could be something quite preventative. You might go, well, I'm going to go for my walk this month. I'm feeling fine, but I know I should go for my walk this month. It's a great place to bring lots of different things together in a very low pressure environment, I think. So there's loads of different facets to it. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think actually that's something that's being done with, I think, groups of young people, even from places, the working class towns of the West Cumbria, your Barrows and Workingtons, Whitehavens, where they're shipping in kids into that Lake District space who've never actually even been there. And some of the lowest or the worst poverty rates in the country are in those sorts of places which are within a stone's throw of a national park. But I think there are analogies around being in those environments. And I've spoken about this before in regard to gardening and this idea you're part of something and you invest in something and you see yourself and you picture yourself and the plants and your plan for it 6 months, 12 months, 3 years into the future. I think the same with that Lake District environment, that pretty much that view that you're looking at is the same view that's been there for 300 years. Mm-hmm. And it's probably going to be pretty much the same in another 300 years. And that's not about making you feel small, but that's about you then thinking, right, well, I can appreciate every single step, knowing that a footstep in this place is a footstep, you know, for the ages. It's not just it's not a rush to a coffee shop, or it's not just I'm legging it for the bus and I've missed it. Now I've got to wait. It's actually, you're part of this bigger place that's untouched by some of those wider things in life that can really get in the way. And I think that's also one of those, that mindful one foot in front of the other can be really powerful as well. Even if you're not thinking about your mental health, I think naturally it takes you to that place where you comprehend those sorts of ideas.
I think it can take you away from the very fast-paced, Instagram-y, achievement thing and very personal worldview. It can put you in a very different environment where, you're connected to something much greater. You can look at the history, you read some Wordsworth and then go look at the same daffodils he saw, do you know what I mean, kind of thing. So you're right, it can take you away from physically, away from whatever pressures are on you, but then also mentally, it can give you something very different to sink your teeth into, one foot in front of the other, go and experience something else. I think it's very much a different environment, both kind of metaphorically and physically and emotionally. Yeah.
You mentioned Kat White before. Great guest on the podcast from a previous episode, still available, by the way. I think I'm right in saying that her film starred Celia Imrie, and I think I'm right in saying Celia's son is Angus Imrie, who was your director as well.
Yeah. So Angus is what a brilliant soul Angus is. He came on board. I was talking to Kat about producing, and Angus came across the script. He read it. We reached some mutual friends and everything, and he read the script. He's like, I'd love to direct it. He hadn't directed for screen before. I was like, you're fantastic, brilliant, and that connection happened, and it was very serendipitous and it was fantastic. And he had so many wonderful ideas about it and the visuals. And then obviously he's what led us to Timothy as Rambler Man, because they're both in the Archers. So they play father and son in the Archers and have done for I think a few years now. And when me and Angus were talking about who could we get to play Rambler Man, some people talked with my father actually playing him, and he very much refused. He's not an actor, he didn't want to do it. And so we were thinking of actors, and he thought of the idea of Timothy, and that kind of, and there was something lovely about Angus, and you were saying before about that kind of swapping of father, adult and child. Someone who plays his son in the Archers is now directing him on screen, and that working relationship was obviously very, very useful. But there was a sort of, I think, intrinsic. We all appreciated how important that kind of relationship is. That sort of father figure and son environment. And
Timothy Bentinck, by the way, looks like like Rambler, doesn't he?
Yeah,
like, in
absolutely.
terms of like how he wears like his waterproofs. Like, did he just go, "No, it's all right, I've got all the gear already"? Like,
well, no, I mean, he's no stranger to walking in the outdoors himself. But no, our entire costume department comes from my father's wardrobe. That was a big save. We saved a lot of money. He's been buying coats for about 20 years. And
they're expensive, those outdoor coats as well.
They are. So he kitted us all out. So that's the thing. I think the reason it looks so good is because it's all real worn gear. The gear I was using is my gear, and luckily Tim and my father are similar builds, so we were able to make that work. And Timothy, I think he found it very useful that my father was there as well, because it's kind of walking inspiration, and as an actor to have someone there that you can draw from, ask questions to. He was very curious during the whole process, which I think was just lovely in terms of learning and bringing out that performance, which is it's a beautiful, there's no other way to describe it, a beautiful performance from Timothy in this. And yeah, so that was there's so many little serendipitous kind of comings together to make it happen. And yeah.
Good stuff. Ramblermanfilm.com is the website where people can go and find out more information. That's ramblermanfilm.com. Just tell us about what your intentions are now in terms of getting this up on some screens. Of course, for anyone who knows the Lake District, Ambleside has got a couple of nice little
there's the Alhambra in Keswick as well. There's a few lovely places.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, they're the audiences who will tut and walk out if that gate doesn't actually lead into that field.
Exactly.
They'll go. I'm looking for a more authentic film.
I've had sleepless nights over for making sure it all matches the map. But no, yes. So it's in the final stages of post-production now. The film, we're going to be visiting festivals throughout 2022. We're currently nailing down a place that the premiere is going to happen. And so I'd recommend everyone follow us on our socials, and they can watch the trailer. They can know more about the film and also the charities we've supported. So we've supported two fantastic charities, Mind Over Mountains and Carlisle Eden Mind. And they can see when it'll be visiting festivals, and then when eventually, I think later in 2022, when we'll have it up and everyone can see it.
Brilliant stuff. Ewan Pollitt, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate joining us on Mental Health Monday. All the best with the film. Ramblermanfilm.com is the website.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
I hope you've enjoyed this week's podcast. Thanks for checking out Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. You can find me on Twitter at Mr. Mick Coyle. You can also find me, Mick Coyle, on Facebook as well. Don't forget, if you want to speak to somebody about your mental health, you can do so. The Samaritans, free to call on 116 123. You can find mental health services where you are. Just look for the Hub of Hope. Type in your postcode. It'll find those mental health services close to you. And for support in a crisis, you can text SHOUT to 85258. That's if you're experiencing a personal crisis, you're unable to cope and need support. Shout to 85258. That's a text line. Do get involved in those services. In an absolute emergency, always remember the number to call is 999. Thanks for downloading the podcast this week. We'll be back next week with more Mental Health Monday.